Welcome back, everyone, to the Unclassified Podcast. I'm Ben Wheeler. I'm joined today with, I'm always joined with Preston Stewart.
Always.
And we are on day 8 of the Israeli-Iranian war, and we're on the cusp of U.S. intervention. Maybe? Who's to say? But we will be getting into that here soon. But before we start, remember to like, comment, subscribe, give us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. We're exploding everywhere. We're becoming the biggest podcast in the land. Trump's listening to it in the Situation Room, which is probably why he can't seem to make a decision. And but before we start, I would like to say my biggest pet peeve, Preston, is the Pentagon pizza tracker. Now, for listeners who do not know what the Pentagon pizza tracker is, maybe you're employed, maybe you don't know what this is. The Pentagon pizza tracker is this, back in the Cold War, Soviet spies would allegedly monitor pizza shops around the Pentagon to determine if U.S. military action was imminent. The understanding being that people were working late, so they would order pizza to the Pentagon, and that would tip off the Soviets. In the modern day now, people are pulling up traffic activity to Domino's and Papa John's around the Pentagon, and they're saying, well, see, it's busy, so it must mean that something's about to happen. And the point of it is to predict something before it happens. So this is a multi-leveled complaint here. It's supposed to predict something before it happens. So you posting on day 7 of this war, it means nothing. Oh, they're working late again? Oh, they're eating pizza? Who cares? Also, secondly, they're not ordering pizza. The way this map works is based on people in the shop, not orders. Domino's is not showing how many orders they have. It's how many people are in the physical shop. All right? Thirdly, I don't know if anyone's going to believe this, but the United States, when we do airstrikes in the Middle East, or really airstrikes anywhere, we do them at 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. Reasons, we have good night vision. Also, people are usually stationary at that point. I don't know if you know this, Preston, but for the past 20 years, every airstrike we've conducted has been in UTC 3 and UTC 4, meaning that it is literally 5 to 6 to 7 p.m., depending on daylight savings time, for Americans. It's just dinner time. It's just dinner time. No one's ordering pizza. The Pentagon has a pizza shop in the Pentagon, okay? No one's ordering pizza. It's infuriating, and people cite this, say something must be happening. Shut up. Don't post a pizza tracker.
Okay.
Yeah, how do you feel about it? I know you hate it too, maybe not as psychotic as me, but
yeah, it's not a hatred, it's a frustration on my part. It's like the people that have accurately predicted 20 of the last 2 recessions. Like, if you say it enough, if you point to every indicator and say this means that we're on the brink, then eventually one of them will be correct. And yeah, I mean, to your point, we've had probably 15 pizza tracker alarms in the last 3 weeks, and I don't know which event you point to, but probably one major event in that window. So yeah, it's nonsense.
Also, am I supposed to believe, when you're posting the pizza tracker on day 7 of this conflict, day 8, am I supposed to believe that the Pentagon's just having pizza constantly? I mean, this
Maybe,
is
I would be, yeah.
Yeah, this is the 9th war this year. Do you think they're still buying the pizza because they have to work late? That's not what's happening. The whole point of a pizza party is that it's rare, and so therefore it's a reward. If every day is a pizza party, it's just hell. It's just, you're just an Italian. That's not a pizza party.
It's nice to see that you're losing sleep over this, but let's set this one aside, and we'll
of course.
Don't let it take too much from you.
Preston, does it happen? Do we intervene in the Iran-Israel war?
President Trump said 2 weeks, when. Right? Yesterday.
Well, he also, before they said 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah. I have actually stopped paying a lot of attention to statements that President Trump is making, quite frankly, around this, because it's all over the place. And you're left with just trying to read between the lines, and it's impossible to do. Did he mean this? Did he mean that? I mean, a couple days ago, he talked about randomly posted unconditional surrender, and then said everyone should evacuate Tehran. And then, listen, given the magnitude of those statements, nothing really happened. Israel continued their strikes. They didn't necessarily go after new or more unique targets than they had already been hitting, and the United States did not get involved. So when you have, if it's intentionally deceptive, it's doing the trick because there's too much noise to pick anything apart. But yeah, I think there's it's a roll of the dice if the United States gets involved at baseline. I do think there's a higher likelihood we would do something on a Friday or a Saturday. To be blunt, because it has less of an impact on the markets.
I agree.
That clearly drives some decision making. So tonight, maybe. Tomorrow, maybe. From what I can tell, it does seem like it's still under consideration. I don't know that a decision's been made.
I am of the belief that it happens. Here's my thought. I think we know that the Nimitz aircraft carrier has been dispatched to the region. It left early. It's on its way over there. On the 16th, it was in the Strait of Malacca, or just past it. I think it arrives tonight. And I think that's when they go. I think they either go tonight or they don't go at all. I think those are the two options. Because every time he says within 2 weeks, how many things have been 2 weeks away? The tariffs, infrastructure week, healthcare, his taxes.
Ukraine, Russia, yeah.
Yeah, Ukraine, Russia. It's always 2 weeks away, and that means nothing's ever happening. So I think it happens tonight, and this podcast becomes totally irrelevant within less than 12 hours of posting.
Yeah. Perfect.
Or it doesn't happen at all.
I think that's a little too concrete. I don't think we're quite there yet. Bigger picture, I think we're seeing Israel do a pretty effective job at eliminating a lot of threats inside of Iran, namely their ballistic missile infrastructure, their manufacturing capabilities for not just missile systems, but also for their nuclear reactors, for their centrifuge facilities got hit the other day, for instance. It does look like they've done pretty significant damage to probably 2 centrifuge locations, enrichment facilities. I think it's naive to assume that Israel does not have a plan for Fordo, the deep buried enrichment site. I think
haven't they said they do a commando raid?
I mean, it's speculation what they may or may not do, but I think it would be naive for Israel to go at this. They've been very meticulous. This is a really interesting dichotomy here. Dropped the ball when it came to the threat that Hamas posed, right? Completely caught off guard with the October 7th attack. But when you look at how they went after Hezbollah and how they're going after Iran right now, it is surgical and very well planned over long periods of time. Like taking out scientists that have been moved to new secure locations after they were like, it's wild, the degree of accuracy and information that they're getting in real time here. It would be strangely reckless to go at this without the ability to actually accomplish all the objectives. So I don't know what that means or what that would look like. But I think along the current path, Israel is heading in that direction. That said, I think the more success they have, the more likely it is that the United States gets involved, not the other way around, because I think we're going to look for air defense is getting pretty beat up in Iran. There's not a lot of it left in certain areas. Mm-hmm. The risk of U.S. aircraft right now getting hit as they go in to strike Iranian facilities is lower than it's ever been in decades, right? So it offers a potential easy win for Trump, for this administration, to say we help to eliminate the Iranian nuclear threat. And each day, as more air defense assets are knocked out, I think it becomes more and more likely that the U.S. goes. I don't know that that's a tonight thing, but I think it's becoming an easier decision as this drags on. What do you think?
I think you're right. Israel's doing a fine job. I do think maybe they entered under the expectation that the United States would take out Fordo for them, because I don't think I've ever seen a country campaign so hard for another country to get involved in their war before. And they're campaigning pretty hard. I mean, you got Netanyahu kind of playing Trump. You know, he says, oh, no one else can do it but you. They keep trying to kill you, yada, yada, yada. But then, just as he thinks Trump's slipping away, he says, well, we could do it on our own, right? I think they entered in under the belief that Trump would intervene. That's what Israeli assessments keep saying, at least according to their various channels. And I don't know. I'm skeptical of the commando raid idea. I think that sounds really dumb, because how many commanders are you going to send? Can they just stack the place of IRGC, you know? So, I don't know. That's my thought on it. Mike, here's my question for you. What do you buy? So there's a big debate going on about the GBU-57. For those who are unfamiliar, this is the U.S.'s bunker buster. I don't want to say it was explicitly created for Fordo, but maybe. It is a 20-foot long, 30,000-pound bomb. I think it might be one of the biggest bombs in the world, definitely bigger than the Moab. And essentially what this does is it buries itself, 200 feet into the ground, something like that, and then it explodes. And we have, I don't know, I think we have around 50 of them, and the only aircraft that can carry them is the B-20, not the B-20, the B-2 stealth bomber. Mm-hmm. Now, there's debate in the White House, allegedly, that Trump is skeptical that these can work. Now, the military has alleged... Now, the only reason we know all this is because U.S. officials live under a permanent compulsion to call their local reporter and tell them. But they call... The military's telling him, they're saying, we think this will work. And they're like, we tested it twice last year, and it worked just fine. But there are some defense officials and the Defense Threat Reduction Agency say, no, it won't work. In fact, you're going to have to use several of these GBU-57s to soften up the ground, and then you'll have to use a tactical nuclear weapon to take out the facility entirely. Now, when this happened, it was initially written in The Guardian as that Trump was not considering it and that he was not briefed on it, and they would not be using a tactical nuclear weapon. Then Fox News gets a hold of the story, and they ask the White House about it, and the White House says, we have not ruled out using a tactical nuclear weapon on Fordo, and everything's on the table. What do you think of this? I'm skeptical that they would use a tactical nuclear weapon. I'm skeptical that Trump's skeptical of the GBU-57 working as well. But what do you make of this?
A lot of skepticism there. So a lot to unpack. Yeah. First off, little trivia moment here. GBU stands for Guided Bomb Unit.
Really?
Yeah.
Massive ordnance. Its nickname is also the Massive Ordnance Penetrator.
Yeah.
Which was Preston's nickname at West Point. And go ahead. Sorry.
I'm trying to provide some nice insight there. Yeah, GBU, Guided Bomb Unit. So you hear that referred to. It's any bomb that has some sort of guidance system attached to it. So smart bomb is what that is.
Got it.
So, all right. I think there's honestly too much unknowns in every direction. We don't know the full capability of that weapon system because it's classified. We have the unclassified version, but with every weapon system we have, especially things like that, the full details aren't known. We're also going off of stats that are not up to date. These weapon systems do not it's not like we develop them, set them in a warehouse, and then move on and say, if we ever need anything with those exact specifications, there's constant refinement and constant innovation. So we don't know exactly the capabilities of that warhead. At the same time, we don't know the exact makeup of the underground facility at Fordo. We've got an idea, but how reinforced it is, what locations we'd go after, all of that stuff is up in the air. So it's very difficult to say yes or no, this one munition would be effective or not effective against this one specific site. I would not be surprised if we went after it, that we hit it with multiple bunker busters just over and over and over again. This is the kind of target. I mean, we even do that when you're going after personnel, like high-value targets. It's not one bomb and move on, especially the higher of the high-value targets. There tends to be multiple strikes, well more than is needed to eliminate one person. So we'll see. I think you're accurate in the sense that as of now, the United States is the only one that can carry those. There's some speculation that there's some other countries that may be on the verge of being able to carry them, but I don't think any of that has made it out public or maybe not actually materialized yet. So we'll see. There's a lot of pieces here at this point, and I don't know. Honestly, it ends up just being speculation.
Right. Do you think, given removing the strike time, because we already discussed the strike time, but do you think, given all else, blind guess right now, does the United States enter the war?
Blind guess. That's what we're here for. Provide the detailed blind guesses.
Your educated opinion, I should say. Sorry.
My gut right now says yes. We will eventually drop some bombs on Iran. Going back to the statement a few minutes ago that air defenses are significantly weakened, so it ends up being an easy way to win. The term war will not be used because that's going to be too politically sensitive. It's not a war. It's
What are they gonna call
it's an
it?
operation, or it's a mission. They'll be insistent on the fact that there's no boots on the ground, which does not appear there's no good reason for the Americans to put boots on the ground in Iran right now. There's no reason that's needed. So it'll be stressed that there's no boots on the ground. It'll be stressed that it's a very short-term mission set or operation. It's not a war. We'll carry out a few strikes and move on. I do think that's probably what's going to happen.
Interesting. Do you think, what are the odds they call it a special military operation?
No, two on the nose.
Not a chance? Two on the nose? I'm of the viewpoint that I think, if you had asked me on Monday, I would have said high. But now I think 50-50. I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll have to see what happens when the Nimitz arrives. But it feels like there's been a lot of waiting around.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of assets moving into the region in recent days, a lot of assets moving into the region. But there's another piece here as well, the political aspect within the White House, which is interesting because I heard it presented as, I don't think this is clean yet. I saw somebody present it as Trump has backed himself into a corner, and I think that runs the risk of removing any ownership from the Iranian regime, the ones actually out there building the nuclear weapon. So I don't want to present it necessarily that black and white, but they brought up something interesting where when you step back and look at this scenario, Trump has expedited the decision-making in this regard, I would say. We're hearing him point to and say, I gave them 60 days, we hit day 61. Now, Israel is not pointing to that at all. They're saying actually Iran was days away from breaking out to the ability of having a nuclear weapon. So there's kind of two justifications, just something to keep in mind. And I think we should hit on that here in a moment, yes. The mixed U.S. intelligence on all of this. I think we really need to keep an eye on that. But nonetheless, Trump is saying it's because the negotiations were not completed, Iran wasn't making progress. So essentially he let Israel off leash, right? Go do your thing. So if that is accurate, if we follow Trump's logic on that part, that means that he has kind of forced the decision in will the United States get involved, yes or no? As in, if he did not let Israel off leash and did not impose this 60-day restriction, then we would still be in this vague window of are we or are we not going to? So in that line of thinking, Trump has forced a decision, has moved that decision up. But here's the thing. Iran is already talking about, and this should not come as a surprise, that they are taking some of their enriched uranium and moving it to new facilities around the country. So instead of storing it in one location, they're panicking, taking what they have still available and moving it to wherever they can. Probably includes some things out of Fordo. There's probably some stuff. I'm not a nuclear scientist, but there's probably some stuff in Fordo to surprise you with that information. But there's probably some stuff in Fordo that they don't want to lose. And at this point, they're moving it to secret locations. Some, maybe not all. If that's the case, it means that striking the 3, 4, 5, 6 facilities in Iran to eliminate their nuclear program 2 weeks ago has now turned into, 20, 30 or more mobile locations moving some of this maybe enriched uranium, some of the plans for how to build a bomb, who knows? So if we don't follow through now, we, the international community, and fully eliminate this threat, it might be worse going forward. Because now Iran has, if you're in their shoes, you're like, cool, yeah, we need a bomb yesterday. Make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So I think there is a little bit of pressure on President Trump here to where if he kind of takes credit for kicking off this process, but then doesn't see it through, and he's the one that backed us out of the JCPOA, which whether you think it was a good thing or a bad thing, an awful agreement, or I personally think it was okay. It was kind of kicking the can down the road and didn't solve a lot of things, but it was still at least moving us in a direction. Trump withdrew us from that and then set this timeline of 60 days. If we don't see it through, I think we're in a worse spot than we were 60 days ago. And I feel like that's probably going to weigh on Trump's decision-making.
I think you're right, but I disagree. I don't think he's backed himself into a corner. I think he can just say, whatever. I think he's the only politician that can actually ever do that. You just go, whatever. I don't think he backed himself into anything. I think he can just say he doesn't care. And the world will move on to the next thing he does. So I don't necessarily think he's under any pressure. Any pressure he feels, he's self-imposed on himself, I think. But
can I push back on that real quick?
yes.
Okay, there's I don't want to completely derail your line of thinking there, but
No, you're
there was a poll recently that showed the majority of Americans do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. It gets a little more nuanced, a little closer to 50-50 when the question is, should we conduct military action to make sure they don't get it? Which makes sense. Don't want them to have that thing. I don't know if we're going to take the action to get there, but so if the majority of Americans do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and we walk away at this point, and Israel is not able to finish the job, and Iran expedites the process to acquire a nuclear weapon, isn't that going to be an easy political point for any opposition inside or outside of the Republican Party to say, hey, on Trump's watch, Iran achieved nuclear weapon status? And that's a message that, at least according to polling, the majority of Americans do not like. So I know you're right. He is able to just brush so many things aside, but there's a bit of bipartisan agreement in not wanting Iran to have a weapon. If they do, they tangibly have this thing, I don't think it's a stretch right now to point to Trump and say it's because he did not. It might be good enough messaging. What do you think?
Wouldn't his supporters just say, well, what was the alternative? Sending young Americans to die like Iraq?
But I think I think that group is split right now. So it's not the normal 50-50 left versus right. I think there's more of I don't think this one falls exclusively along partisan lines, and I think there is a bit of a divide inside of Trump's base.
That's true.
I'm projecting.
We actually polled our audience this week to say, are you pro-war with Iran or are you anti-war with Iran? And surprisingly, it came back with over 500 votes. We came back 50-50. So very impressive. You're right, a big split among the American public. But so here's my thought. I'm of the viewpoint that the online isolationist right is a minority. Because when you do these polls of like rank and file Republicans, they all want to strike, right? But like the Theo Vons and the Tucker Carlsons seem to be a pretty small minority of the party. They may be the loudest, but these polls seem to show that they are the smallest. So I don't know. I think maybe it's like a scandal for a little bit, but I don't think it actually affects them in the long term. I think that the isolationist wing is very small, and it definitely seems like with Trump we started off going off in a whole new direction of foreign policy, but now we seem to be getting back to regular U.S. foreign policy altogether. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but it seems like we are, we're not leaving NATO. We are assisting Ukraine again, kind of, and, well, we cut off aid. But, we weren't doing what we were doing, and we're back to hating Iran and, fencing in China. So, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see here, but what do you think? So we strike Iran. We hit them hard. Of course there's going to be a retaliation. Do you think we see U.S. service members in the 40,000 or so that are around the Gulf? Do you think we see casualties there? Do you think we see them mine the Strait of Hormuz? Do we see a dirty bomb? Does the regime fall? I mean, we're waking up. Last night they struck tonight at 5 p.m. and you're waking up. What happens the next day after we strike?
Probably some questions about why I went to bed before 5 p.m. We'll start there, but who knows? Maybe it was a tough day. It's summer, The kids home. So I think the most likely course of action you have to look at here is the Iran and their proxy forces attacking U.S. forces in the Middle East. We haven't seen that yet. Kataib Hezbollah, one of the Iranian militias, Iran-backed Iranian militias, just today issued a threat saying if the United States gets involved, we're going to attack the United States, which they're arguably one of the biggest, most well-equipped Shiite militias in Iraq. So that's noted. You can't brush that aside entirely. A big question is what are the capabilities of a lot of those groups around the region? We've known in recent years that Iran has sent them more and more advanced weapon systems. We've started to see some ballistic missiles with these militia groups, which is crazy. I mean, they were just slinging off cheap drones a couple of years ago. So as part of that proxy network, Iran has definitely built them up to a degree, and Iran has not used, it doesn't look like, a single cruise missile so far in these attacks against Israel, which is interesting. They're also not using any of their medium to short range ballistic missiles because those won't range Israel, but they will range a lot of U.S. forces and allies in the Middle East. So that is probably the most likely scenario if Iran decides to go that route. I think they will. If things get difficult enough, I think they know that's a pressure point they can layer on. I think it would be, the gamble on their part would be if they go after the United States, and this goes right back to the conversation we were having a second ago, when that comes back to the U.S. in public discourse, do we double down and say nobody does this and we hammer Iran? Or do we say, what are we doing in the Middle East in the first place? Are we really going to get drug into another war? And I don't know that there's a clear answer on that. So it might not be a crazy gamble for Iran to take if they're running out of options. Thoughts on that before I get into some of the other possibilities here?
So if they retaliate and they kill U.S. service members, you're saying?
Does the United States go all in, or is that the what are we doing in the Middle East anymore?
So I think what we saw in 2020 after he drone striked Soleimani is they fired missiles at the U.S. base, right? And no U.S. service members were killed. But if I'm remembering correctly, and it's been 5 very long years, the U.S. soldiers there had traumatic brain trauma from the impacts of the
injuries,
missiles. Yeah. And my understanding is that it was covered up to a certain extent, or attempted to, and they said, well, no one got injured, so we're not going to respond. I could see that happening. I think if you have large-scale casualties, I don't know how you get around covering that up. I don't know how you get around in general. I think if I'm Iran, my best plan is, if I'm going down, you're going down too, right? And so I think, you kind of have to hit back. You have to hit back hard, and you have to hopefully drag Trump into a prolonged war to the point where he becomes effectively politically dead in the United States. That is pretty much your only hope. At least if, you want to come out with a win of any kind. So that is my guesstimation there. I think they're much more likely to mine the Strait of Hormuz as a retaliatory effect. In addition to that, I think that is once you do that, it's kind of like everything freezes up, right? So...
yeah, it's worth getting into some of these other ones here as well. The dirty bomb issue, of course, is a concern because it doesn't take you're not developing a nuclear weapon. There's a lot less technology involved. It's just essentially spraying radioactive material over a large area with an explosive warhead. And it could cause an area to be depopulated for long periods of time, uninhabitable for a long period of time. So that's nasty. That's straight up terrorism, would be the way to put that. But it is a possibility, and with the amount of enriched uranium that Iran has right now, they do have enough to make dirty bombs if they were to go that route. Another key one here would be cyber attacks. They do have a pretty decent cyber capability. We haven't seen them employ that at all quite yet. But I think the bigger question, the more overarching question here is, right now this has been pretty well constrained between Israel and Iran. They're firing missiles over U.S. forces in the Middle East at times to hit each other. Well, Israel's flying over, and then Iran is firing missiles over. What would it take for Iran to break out of that pattern and decide, you know what, enough? And I don't know if they're going to do that without the U.S. getting directly involved.
That is a good point. Speaking of which, I have seen that Iran is somehow bypassing Israeli air defense. They've been firing off 2-3 missiles at a time, and now it seems like more and more are getting through.
Yeah.
There were some speculation that people were saying that maybe they were testing the air defense capabilities of Israel with 3 to 4 missiles at a time. And that does seem to be right, but my understanding is also that their launchers are kind of down as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot here. We've seen roughly the same, it looks like roughly the same percentage of munitions are getting through. on or about. There's a fair amount of footage. I'm seeing people talk about how there's all sorts of censorship and suppression of media. Like, good luck, right? Everybody in Israel has a cell phone. You can try to in Iran. They've shut down the internet at times. There's still some stuff coming out a little bit, but good luck effectively censoring everything coming out of Israel. It's just not going to happen. So you do have a lot of people that are slow in sharing battle damage assessments because that does assist Iran. And of course, no military member on a base is ever going to upload and be like, look at that missile that just missed our F-35 hangar. So big picture, it does look like roughly the same number of munitions are getting through. Just as we went to hit record today, it sounds like there were more impacts inside of Israel. In any prolonged campaign like this, you would expect Iran to be testing the Israeli air defense. A lot of the air defense platforms are mobile, if not all. So that means that one area that is defended tonight might not be as well defended tomorrow. And one of the things Iran is certainly doing with the IRGC officials they still have is figuring out where those munitions are getting through, where the hard points are, where the soft points are, and where it's worth spending their munitions. I have a little bit of a theory right now that I think Iran has focused more of their attacks on, they're calling them secret Israeli bases. I think it's intentionally going after more of the population centers because they're going to be not as heavily guarded as, say, the F-35 air bases that are constantly striking Iran day in and day out. So instead, they're putting more munitions towards some of these, quote, secret bases that happen to be in the middle of, like, Tel Aviv. And then, you know, there's damage caused to the population center. There's civilians killed. I think 24 civilians have been killed so far at this point, more than 500 wounded. Buildings destroyed, residential structures downed, cars destroyed and burning. I think there's a bit of a psychological impact Iran is going for there, rather than going after the very hardened targets that are their military locations.
Is this kind of like a Russia thing where their munitions are not all that accurate, so they just fire them into population centers so they have a better chance of getting a hit?
Yes and no. Again, we don't know. Iran consistently says they're targeting military resources, military assets. And when a missile impacts what is clearly a residential building in Tel Aviv, Iran will say, we hit the secret Mossad base, right? So there's that. And they say it was a successful strike against a secret Mossad base. We don't know what the actual target is for any of these strikes. We don't know the target of those that are intercepted. So let's say whatever Iran plugs into their computer is unknown to us. All we can see is the aftermath. So their missiles are not as accurate as, say, American long-range systems. However, we have seen a pretty significant increase in their effectiveness in recent months and years. The True Promise 2, they went after some Israeli airfields, and we saw, within 10, 20 meters of very sensitive locations were missile impacts. So, are they going to be able to put a missile at this distance, 2,000 kilometers through exactly the right window? Maybe not. Will they be able to hit the building they're going for? Probably. So there's a little bit of a mixed question of, and it's the same thing that we've had with Russia, right? Are they deliberately going after those civilian structures, or is their targeting so bad that they don't know it's a civilian structure and they just don't care that they hit it? I think it's a little bit of both.
Interesting. Yeah, I was surprised to see the casualty numbers last night, where 600 Iranians dead, and I think 1,000 wounded, or maybe over 1,000 wounded, and then on the Israeli side, over 1,000 wounded, and I don't know, was it 20 deaths, something like that?
24 as of yesterday. I don't know if that's changed overnight.
So I was surprised to see that, because I was under the impression that Iran was getting most of their missiles shot down. So I was surprised to see that they were able to inflict so many wounded, so many casualties in general.
A couple notes there, and the majority of Iranian missiles are being intercepted. Almost, I think every single drone has been shot down. Very few have even entered Israeli airspace, and those that have were shot down or crash landed. So it's the missiles right now where some are getting through. When you're looking at the casualty figures, one thing to keep in mind there is we're getting, based off the publicly available information, the stuff we have access to, Israel's releasing a lot of strike footage. So we're seeing soldiers manning missile launchers getting blown up. Like, you cannot... The guy getting ready to push the button on the back of a long-range ballistic missile heading towards Israel, that's not a civilian. So, like, there's a lot of military assets getting destroyed. True. You would assume then that the people manning those are military. In Israel, 0 of the 24 killed have been military, and only 7 soldiers have been so far wounded, to my understanding. And they were lightly wounded and they returned to service. I don't know what the numbers are inside of Iran in terms of military versus civilian. No doubt there are civilian casualties at this point. You can't carry on a campaign like this and have that number be 0. But we've seen, the IRGC commanders actually would be a good example. We saw a lot of Israeli munitions go right through the windows, right through the bedroom wall of some of these guys and killed them in their sleep. They were probably, I assume, some of them were married, which means that there was probably a spouse in that room with them. Now, notably, the entire building did not come down. The entire house was not blown up. You see like a precision strike in a window, and like that room is burned out, and the one next to it still has windows kind of thing. It's crazy. But no doubt civilian casualties. My gut says right now the majority of those killed in Iran are military officials or military personnel.
So do you want to get into the intelligence dispute between the U.S. and Israel?
Yes. I think this is actually really important and something we should probably spend a lot of time on going forward if it's not completely clear.
Good. Yeah, let's do it. So I'll give a brief overview and tell me if this is correct or not. But my understanding is that U.S. intelligence says Iran is not developing a nuclear bomb, and that even if they were, they're 3 years away from doing so. Israel says that they're actively trying to assemble 9 nuclear bombs, or they can develop 9 nuclear bombs rapidly. The IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, says that Iran is not in compliance, but they also said that they found no evidence that they were trying to assemble a nuclear bomb. So they kind of take the middle of the two positions. What's going on here? And when Trump was asked about this, he said he didn't care about the U.S. intelligence agency's assessments. So is there intelligence we're not privy to, or does this seem like what it seems like?
Part of the challenge here is, yes, there's obviously a ton of information we're not privy to. So a little bit of what you have to do here is decide who you trust and who you're going with. Because Israel is saying, I think their most recent assessment, they said, they didn't give a number of days, but they said Iran had made the decision and they were days away from being able to assemble a nuclear bomb. Obviously, you and I we're not in that signal group chat. All the way over to the U.S. saying that they have not made that decision to move forward with the assembly of a nuclear weapons program. My gut says it's probably somewhere in between those two. We have no idea, right? Like, I have no idea if the Israeli assessment is 100% accurate and we just completely missed the ball, or vice versa. And that's part of the challenge. I'm getting ready to say like what my gut is, but like that's just entirely based off of feels. That doesn't do anything. The reason I said that I think we should really keep an eye on this is going back to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, there was a lot of kind of manufactured consent around why we needed to go in. And in retrospect, a lot of the reasons given were not good. Now, Saddam, bad, got it. IRGC, bad, got it. If there's a new group that comes in after the Ayatollah, hopefully it generally should be better for the Iranian people. Of course, things could get worse and it could be fumbled, but bad group does not automatically mean that all the other information we have about the justification for war is genuine. I don't know which of those assessments is correct, but it makes me nervous so President Trump saying there was a great clip of Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, saying we assess that Iran has not restarted their nuclear weapons program that was paused back in 2003. She said that in March. President Trump was given that quote like 2 days ago, and he said, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was along the lines of like, I don't care.
It was.
Or I don't believe it.
Yeah.
That, like, which one of those are we going with? Because I feel like either side of that is concerning. Either our intelligence assessments are way off, or our intelligence is set, which is concerning, or it's on, and the president is openly saying, I'm not going to abide by it. I don't care, political party, anything, like that, we got to figure out how to square that circle, because something isn't right there.
I agree. I also think it's worth noting that the U.S. when Israel provided the U.S. with their intelligence. U.S. Intelligence agencies found it unconvincing, according to reports. So, I think that says something, right? Maybe we're assessing it wrong, but something's off there where they say they don't find it very moving. I also think it's like, you're right, with Iraq there was a lot of manufacturing consent. I also think this is not comparable to 2003, but I think the end game is comparable to the after 1992, if that makes sense. So, after Saddam invaded Kuwait, the United States pushes him out. For the next 10 years, up until 2003, the United States maintains a no-fly zone over Iraq, and they bomb what is believed to be Saddam's nuclear facilities or his biological labs, whatever. And they maintain that for about 10 years. And eventually, it has a toll on them, right? You just can't do this indefinitely. So it made war with Saddam inevitable, even if they lied about why they needed to go in. I think that's kind of what we're going towards now, right? Where Israel says, even after we blow up the nuclear program, we're still going to have to maintain airstrikes and keep a presence in Iran. Like,
have they said, hold on, though, I don't think I've seen that from Israel.
My understanding is they said that as soon as it's over, we're not done yet. And that their belief is that they want regime change.
There has been a slow increase in conversation about regime change from some unofficial channels that I've seen in Israel, but the majority of their official statements at this point is immediate threat eliminated, which they now say they've done, and then the long-term threat of the missiles and the nuclear program. I think a criticism to have there is there might not be a good plan, a coherent plan for the day after.
Oh, I fully agree. I think we're walking into another Iraq, not a 2003 Iraq, but a 1992 Iraq, where we're just going to have to keep airstriking until the regime falls. And I believe I have seen Netanyahu call for the Iranian people to overthrow Khomeini. Is that how you say his name, Khomeini?
He put out Khamenei. He put out a statement a couple days ago addressed to the Iranian people where he just said, like, hey, now is your time. It was very... I mean, you could interpret it that way for sure. And, like, look, they would love it if the Iranian people stood up. So I don't want to play that down at all. So I was fortunate to sit in on a press briefing with the IDF last week.
Oh, cool.
And this is a question I asked. So for Lieutenant Colonel Nadav, the international spokesperson, my question was, are you directing any resources at the Iranian people? Like, is there anything you're doing to try to, provide them additional power and resources and the means of maybe pushing back or whatever it might be? And I thought his answer was interesting because it's how Israel views themselves in the region. And he said, like, we can't do that because anybody in the region that sees something coming from Israel is immediately discredited. So, like, that has to come from other sources. That has to come from the United States maybe or other countries in the region. But anybody with the direct backing of Israel loses legitimacy. And I thought that was interesting. So it does kind of, and I can see it. I mean, if you watch any media around this conflict, the minute Israel says anything, there's an entire group of people that say they could say that the sun came out this morning, and there's going to be a group of people say, I don't know, Israel says it. I'm not going to buy it. So it was just an interesting view of, yeah, that definitely is something, it's a consideration, but it's not something that we can effectively tackle. Almost like it would be worse if they started advocating publicly for regime change and for any one faction.
It's true. That is true. I don't think they can be the spark that lights the flame of revolution in Iran. I also worry, though, that, there's always talk about assassinating Khamenei, but it came from the Israeli defense minister yesterday, who said he can't be allowed to exist anymore or something like that. And then Trump's threats, of course, saying he's not going to kill him yet and all this other stuff, and then wishing him good luck. I don't know. I worry we're going to create, like, super ISIS. I know they're not. Iran and ISIS are enemies, Iran is the outsider in the region. They're Persian, not Arab. They're Shia, not Sunni. But I do worry we are creating monster here if this regime does fall. I think it's just overall a bad situation. I also think we have kind of been locked into a corner, if that makes sense, and that Iran is going to develop the bomb now, no matter what.
If they can.
If they can. After Israel struck, the genie's out of the bottle. It will happen. They will develop a bomb if they can. I also think if the United States strikes, they'll also develop a bomb. I think if Israel goes home, they're developing the bomb. I think the bomb is inevitable at this point. And the only way to fix that is with regime change. But regime change is a nightmare and does not promise to get the results that we need. I also, if there's anyone I hate more than the Pentagon pizza tracker, have you seen this guy, the Shah's son? So for those who don't know, Iran had a Shah who was overthrown in 1979 by the current regime. And I don't know, the Shah died sometime in the 80s. And his son now is saying, his son hasn't lived in Iran, been to Iran in 50 years. And he's saying that he's going to come, he's going to take over, and that he's the only legitimate ruler of Iran. And everyone keeps giving him interviews. I get him the hell off my TV screen. He doesn't know what he's doing. Who is this guy? He has no legitimacy whatsoever. And I'm quite tired of him. So I think, I don't know, we're in a bad spot with no winning solution. If we could reverse back to Thursday of last week, maybe that's too early. Wednesday of last week, I would say, don't strike.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how we. I mean, do you see what I'm saying here? It just seems like we have no good solution.
But we hit an impasse here as well with the negotiations. So, negotiations had been going on, and I personally think this was a problem in the Biden administration. I don't think there was nearly enough attention paid to Iran. We just kind of the Trump administration walked away. Trump 1.0 walked away from the JCPOA. Did not get anything new stood up in that interim. And then during 4 years of Biden in office, we didn't really do anything there at all. I think that was a problem. I think that was a missed opportunity. So to lay this entire thing on the first 90, 100 days of Trump's presidency is a mistake because this goes back quite a ways. Trump just kind of put his foot on the gas and said, we're going to resolve this thing now. The negotiations had been going on, but they'd been at a standstill for a long time because even just we had not even gotten into a lot of the details yet. And the core premise, there were significant aspects in the United States saying there will be no enrichment in Iran, full stop. But it looks like we offered up to like 2.3%. Iran was saying, you will not limit that at all. There will be no limitations on what we can do. They said, we're not going to move towards a bomb, but like you cannot restrict us in that. So like the most basic elements of an agreement, we were on different pages. And like it did not appear that we were going to be able to shift in one direction or another. So I don't think the negotiations were going anywhere, whether that was intentional or not. They really hadn't made much progress.
That's fair. That is fair. I think maybe we need to you go back to 2018 then. You don't pull us out of the JCPOA.
That's the move, yeah. Go back or even pull us out and come up with a better option, different option.
Well, that was the plan. He said we're pulling because we're going to get a better deal. And then there was no deal. And,
is this it? Is this the deal?
Yeah. Right. This is, I guess, the deal, yeah. But also I think the Biden administration, they tried one of the weirder things in diplomacy, folks, is that when two countries aren't talking, and I think this is a pretty exclusively like a U.S.-Iran thing, because I don't know if any two countries have the history and the drama of these two cultures and countries, but they have indirect talks. And what that means is that another country, a third country, has to dedicate their foreign minister to going into one room. They're right next to each other. And so if Steve Witkoff, the Secretary of State, and then the Deputy Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, are in the room, then the Omani or the Switzerland foreign minister, they go in, they say, yeah, tell them we want no enrichment. So then he walks over to the room next door and he says, the Americans want me to tell you that there's no enrichment. And then the Iranians say, tell them no. So he goes back over and he says,
tell them I'm still not talking to them.
Yeah, the Iranians want me to tell you no. And that is what happened that is how the Obama administration managed to pull off the JCPOA. But it's also how Trump's renegotiate the JCPOA went. and it's how Biden conducted negotiations. And I believe under this administration, was it that the Iranians met directly with Witkoff, so there weren't indirect talks because Witkoff isn't like a formal member of the government or something like that, where they managed to meet with him directly. But that is what went down here. And I guess we got nowhere. I don't know. It just seems like we're in a bad spot right now. And I listened to an interesting talk from the Council of Foreign Relations with one of the Pentagon's strategists. They used to have that strategic office before we got rid of it. And she was saying that the United States is constantly trying to trap China in these wars. So this Iran thing is maybe the U.S. trying to trap China in Iran and like trying to get them to back a war or something. And she says they're not taking the bait. They don't take the bait ever.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, we do. We take our own bait and end up getting involved in these things. She was like, so, I mean, maybe they're trying to trap China here and backing Iran, but China's not taking the bait. And I just thought, that's very interesting. Yeah. So
let me throw a different perspective out here, though, because I feel like we're a little bit downer on everything. And there is a perspective that this is finally, for the first time in 20 years, a step in the right direction of actually dismantling the threat that is the Iranian regime. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of folks in that camp like, good. We'll see what comes next, but what exists now and what has been operating for the past few decades has been a major problem, and this is the first tangible, concrete steps towards eliminating that. So I just want to, it's not.
No, you're right.
There's a lot of bad directions this could go, but if it's also the first time we've ever had where there might be an opening for some serious change there.
That's very true. That is very true. I hope the Iranian people. I wish them well. I like the Iranian people, but I don't know where this is going.
Wait until tonight. Wait until check the pizza tracker in a few hours.
Don't check the pizza tracker. You're just trying to get me all worked up here. Now, here's my question for you. Do you think that the very visible movement of U.S. assets to the region was intentional? Or do you think it's just how it goes? Because you got to market so everyone else can see you around. Or do you think it was intentionally to build up pressure? Because if this is a bluff, this is a pretty expensive bluff. And also, moving it very publicly kind of sent the whole world knows we're coming now, right?
Yeah. I mean, it again, not everything is 2003 Iraq, but it reminds me of that, where there was a very clear, very public troop buildup in Kuwait. So when George W. Bush was making threats against Saddam, step aside, step out of power, or else, there was actually some clear muscle backing that threat. The threat would have come across. I mean, right now, like if we were to say to Kim Jong-un, you have 24 hours to leave power or else we're going to invade, he would rightly look at it and be like, I don't know, probably not. We got a couple thousand in South Korea. So it does offer some negotiating strength when we have the assets in the region and could say tonight. Or, I mean, maybe that ends up being what it is. Trump has, said a lot of things that would suggest regime change, but then doesn't actually say regime change. Like, he used the term unconditional surrender and then said it was like the surrender of their nuclear program. But anyways, it wouldn't be crazy to see a deadline dropped at some point here, and that deadline does have more muscle behind it if we've got, additional forces in the region. Also on top of that, we are seeing a lot of military forces at some of our more permanent, semi-permanent locations like Kuwait and Qatar, things like that, where it's relatively built up. Aircraft that were out in the open have been moved. So the only aircraft at some of these bases are now in hardened shelters, which is more of a protected stance. We've seen ships in ports in the Middle East disperse and not be all bunched up in port anymore. Kind of a wartime posture, if you will.
Yeah, it's all very interesting, and I guess we're gonna find out what happens here very soon, aren't we? On the topic of Trump talking about regime change and then not saying it, do you think this is all a stalling tactic until the Nimitz gets there? Because one thing the Navy tells us, they want to have 2 aircraft carriers there before they enter the conflict. The Nimitz arrives tonight or tomorrow, in theory. I don't know how fast it goes, but, I mean... based on my uninformed opinion, it's got to be there soon. So do you think, and what do you think?
I haven't really put much thought into that piece of it. We've got a lot in the Middle East already.
That's very true.
A lot. So,
do you foresee other countries joining? I've heard Germany say that they could join. I've seen France say they call for a ceasefire, but that Iran should never have a nuclear weapon. The UK is talking about joining. Do you see anyone else getting involved here?
I don't. I think the highest likelihood involvement is the United States. After that, I think it's a big fall off. I mean, intelligence support maybe. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of incentive for. I think there's a benefit to a lot of other countries if Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, and if Iran ends up with a new friendlier regime. I think that benefits a lot of people around the world. I don't think there's the stomach right now to go to war with the United States and Israel against Iran, quite frankly.
It's true. What do you think? So, things are getting pretty bad. I assume this goes on longer. You're going to have a lot of refugees. You have 90 million people. I know that courtesy of Tucker Carlson. Did you see that interview between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz? That was crazy.
I just saw some clips. It was difficult to watch. I don't know, if you like one guy or the other guy or what, or prefer one tone, but it was hard to listen to.
Yeah. It felt like
very condescending, in both directions, very condescending. Neither one of them actually wanted to be there.
That's correct. I was surprised that the interview took place given the tone of it. But for those not listening, Tucker Carlson asked Ted Cruz, the senator of Texas, he said, "What's the population of Iran?" And Ted Cruz says, "I don't know." And Tucker says that you don't know the population of the country you want to overthrow. And he goes, "I don't read population tables." And they went back and forth for 3 minutes over this. It was pretty ridiculous.
There were some wild statements in that interview, though, so I don't...
Yeah,
it's hard to take those guys... It's hard to take anybody seriously when the craziness starts coming out of left field, but yeah.
Absolutely. So what do you think... this is going to be a crisis for the region, not just the Middle East, but also Central and South Asia. There are 90 million Persians in Iran. Where are they going to go?
Well, so a lot of this is... go back to the opening days of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Was that going to be a 1 week conflict or a 1 month conflict? I don't think anybody really predicted that it would be going on for 3 years. There is the possibility that this thing doesn't wrap up anytime soon. And one possible Iranian strategy would be to drag this out for the long term. They have a lot of missiles, likely still have quite a few remaining. They have a much larger population than Israel, although I wouldn't really present this as an attritional style of war. It's costing Israel a lot to defend their skies day in and day out, and it costs Israel a fair amount of money to continue to carry out airstrikes 2,000 kilometers away from home. So it would not be the craziest thing in the world if the Ayatollah or the IRGC leadership said, you know what we're going to do? Hunker down. We're going to drag this thing out. And we're just going to 3 missiles a day for the next 6 months. So at what point do refugees start fleeing the country? Because it doesn't seem like that's happened quite yet. There's not been a mass. We're seeing people leave Tehran, but not leave Iran entirely. And I got a note from somebody the other day that medications are all of a sudden harder to get in Tehran than they've ever been. Happens very quickly. So you'll see that start to spread, and that'll get worse over time. But also, the longer this goes on, the more some of that stuff stabilizes. And in this case, the Iranian people figure out how to live in a wartime environment. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities of refugees, certainly, but really hard to predict with, does this get wrapped up with a U.S., GBU-57 strike on Friday and the Iranian regime falls, or is it Christmas Eve and we're seeing that day's barrage of Iranian missiles? Very, very different conflicts in a lot of ways.
Very true. On the note of the attritional warfare, it's important to note that nobody starts an attritional war. For every blitzkrieg into France, there are 5 Stalingrads, Russian invasion of Ukraine, U.S. war in Afghanistan. There are, I guess the U.S. war in Afghanistan was not attritional, but you get my point. That for every blitzkrieg, for every quick war, there are 5 that continue on forever. So, I don't know. Let's hope if we do take action, it is a blitzkrieg into France, and it is not a you know, I don't know, a rerun.
Ben,
You don't
Ben,
well,
no.
right.
I just don't. I don't know that we should be using Nazi Germany as our example of like. Let's hopefully.
Wait. Oh yeah, let me correct that. Wait, I didn't mean it like. I meant just like a fast operation. I didn't mean like war crimes and the Holocaust and everything.
Ideally, this looks like 1939 on the move through Poland. Yeah, no, don't say that.
Okay, all right. Okay, right. Well, let's like the invasion of Grenada is what I hope. Okay, something quick, wrapped up very fast. I don't know. You know, thoughts and prayers to the Israelis and the Iranians and the poor Iraqis who have to watch the missiles fly over their house every single day. Do you think Jordanians? Everyone talks about the Iraqis being in the middle of this, but the Jordanians, I mean, they got to watch these missiles. How many missiles do you think fall in Jordan? Because I feel like it's a lot easier.
It seems like not a lot right now.
Yeah, I don't know. That see a missile coming down on you and just hope it lands in Israel seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Did you see some of the footage of the aircraft, planes taking off, and they're like, "Oh, look, out the left window, you can see missiles being launched from Iran." It's like that shit.
I saw the people. Did you see the people in Lebanon having a wedding? There's like a saxophone player, and they just see the missiles coming down from Iran, and I was like, "That's crazy, absolutely nuts." I can't imagine being party to that. Just crazy. But I believe that concludes this week's episode. I'm sure something happens. You'll hear from us tomorrow or Sunday, maybe Monday, Tuesday. But remember, like, comment, subscribe. Give us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple. And let us know what you liked. Don't like, follow us on socials. And we'll see you soon enough, I'm sure.